And they're this secret group of people who are plotting and scheming to create a one world government. And then you have the United States of Europe, the EU. And the EU is seen as the restored Roman Empire. What they see is that the kingdom of the Antichrist is the old Roman Empire being restored, but on a global basis. The Trilateral Commission, have you ever heard of that? The Trilateral Commission. That's a group of United States congressmen and other foreign policy officials in our government are working to establish multilateral treaties and connections between countries, and that is part of this whole move toward a one world government. The Bilderbergs are a German family. You gotta get the Germans in here, folks. I mean, you can't have a conspiracy without the Germans. So you got this family that has been around here for decades, going back to the 1800s, and in each of the world wars, trying to create this world government. They were even in here with Hitler and a few others, and this was all a part of this one world government. Then you have the New Age religions. The New Age religions are a part of what Revelation talks about as the false prophet, creating a new false religion in which all of the religions have truth. Oprah. You can get to God in many different ways. Oprah, New Age, crystals. We accept the Muslim, and we accept the Buddhist, and we accept the Hindu, and we accept all of them as merely different paths to get to the same place, which is, oneness with God, or achievement, or self-actualization, or whatever. And all of this New Age movement stuff is going to create a world religion. So we're going to have a world ruler with a world religion, and all of these things that are going to come together to create the one world government, which will establish itself during the tribulation with the Antichrist. President Obama, according to Henry Kissinger has been quoted as saying, President Obama is being primed to create the New World Order. Now that's been in 2 or 3 have been reported, and people like Jack Van Impe and others are just going crazy. That not necessarily that he is the Antichrist, although some of them thinking maybe he might be, but he is so involved as, of course, he's not a true American, right? He's Muslim, right? Not Christian. He's more tolerant of other religions, right? He goes to the UN and he speaks and he's proclaimed, and they have quotations of various people who actually are calling Obama savior. They're going nuts that this may be the man who is grooming, if not the Antichrist, but is laying the groundwork for the Antichrist. So what they do is that they have just enough current events, just enough historical information that you can kind of throw it together and mix it up. And people who really don't think critically, people who don't ask questions, people who hear this stuff, take it hook, line, and sinker and go, oh my gosh, this is in my headlines. This is my president. This is happening. This is real. And they don't stop to ask the questions. How does this conspiracy thing ever hang together? What makes it work? How does it work? It's kind of like all of the other conspiracy theories that you often hear. It's this kind of a little bit snippet here, a little bit snippet there. You've all heard of the 9/11 conspiracies. Same principles are at work here with this conspiracy theory about the end times, the one world government, the New World Order. And that's one of the things that when you start listening to these folks, you have to kind of take a deep breath and start getting your critical thinking into gear. What is your evidence? Where did you hear this? What they are very famous for doing is taking a phrase like New World Order and capturing it and bringing it into a Bible verse, and then all of a sudden, whoop-de-doo, plugging it into their conspiracy theories. So that's one of the things you have to start watching for as you listen to these people, because as I was mentioning during the break, there are groups that take this stuff, such as the Aryan Nation, Ku Klux Klan, other groups, survivalists, Christian survivalists. I can remember back in the 70s that there were groups that were advocating that we all needed to go out to the desert, we all needed to go out to the wilderness, we need to get our guns, we need to have at least 7 years supply of food, we need to get our bomb shelters built, we need to do the whole thing to get ready for this horrible stuff that's happening or going to happen. So you kind of get people who really jump off the edge, and it feeds into some of the stuff you're going to be seeing with the birthers and some of the other things in the very fringe areas of the conservative movement. I'm not branding the whole conservative movement this way, but I am saying that there are fringe elements that take this stuff and jump off the cliff. So kind of be watching if you hear from some of these things and hear some of these terms. That's why they don't like the United Nations. They believe that it is the end of nationalism. Kind of like Lenin's song, imagine no religion and no nations too, nothing to die or fight for, you know? And they're afraid of losing that nationalism because they are very much into the patriotism of the United States and its sovereignty, which I think in many ways we could agree in part with, but into the other end, they want to eliminate these types of things because they see it as the forerunner of the Antichrist and the New World Order. Questions? Okay, now let me do a little analysis here with something I do want to share with you. In terms of the rapture, in terms of where it came from, how it developed, I mentioned that during the 1800s, it developed. I'm reading from The Battle for God, A Story of Fundamentalism by Karen Armstrong. I recommend anything by Karen Armstrong. She has written probably a dozen books. She started out as a Catholic nun and has sort of evolved into this very scholarly, incredibly good writer. And her own book here, The Battle for God, on page 139, she writes, "There was one important difference, however. Whether the Europeans imagined everybody enduring the ordeal of the Great War, Darby, and Darby is the one that introduces premillennialism and the dispensationalism to the United States in the 1800s. Darby provided the elect way out on the basis of a chance remark in St. Paul, who believed that Christians alive at the time of Jesus' second coming will be taken up to the clouds in a medium in the air. We just read that, didn't we? Darby maintained that just before the beginning of the tribulation there would be a rapture, a snatching up of born-again Christians who would be taken up to heaven so that they could escape the terrible sufferings of the last days. The rapture has been imagined in concrete literal detail by premillennialists. They are convinced that suddenly airplanes, cars, trains will crash and born-again pilots and drivers are caught up into the air while their vehicles are out of control." Now, she writes, like many concrete depictions of mythical events, the scene looks a little absurd, but the reality it purports is present and cruel and divisive and tragic. Now, that's her point of view. I share it very much so. And Darby came from Britain to the United States in the 1800s, and he was the one that introduced. So that is true, that very much this idea of premillennialism and dispensationalism is a fairly new product. It's not entirely American, but it has been sort of captured by American Christians, in particular the ones that I've mentioned, as kind of an American viewpoint of the end of the world and an escape. And this is the one thing that really appeals to people. It's an escape from all of the bad things that are going to happen to this kind of wish rapture type event. So, part of the analysis that you